bit of a different topic. Also an extravagant name, boots and suits. We have some boots here who would be typically in boots, now in suits as well. But the topic of this podcast is the fact that cyber defense is no longer the domain of any single actor. We saw it yesterday as well, how cyberspace transposes itself over all domains, air, land, sea, and others. And it's a shared battlefield, actually, where a lot of organizations and corporations have to work together in order to reach their goals, all from the public part, the military part, and the private sector as well. I'm joined by three wonderful panelists here today, with whom we will explore the sort of potential problems, solutions into cooperation between all of the aforementioned sectors. So, to kick it off, how about you all give a quick introduction to yourselves and what you do?
Hi, everybody. My name is Daina. I'm for CERT.LV, and my background is a bit of defense, a bit of NATO, and currently I'm education and training expert in Latvian cybersecurity.
So my name's Michael Widman. I'm currently an ambassador to the NATO CCD-COE, or Cyber Defense Center of Excellence. I've been working with NATO for over 10 years, mostly focusing on cyber issues and cyber operations.
And my name is Anastasia, and I'm head of security engineering at Kozak Labs. Basically, my background is security engineering, applied cryptography, yada yada, and I work for British-Ukrainian company that does a lot of security in complex distributed systems that that have high risks and high stakes.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Now, let's kick it off. Mutual trust, something that is absolutely necessary when we work with different organizations, whether it be locally, whether it be internationally, whether we come from a public sector, whether we come from a private sector. How do we build it and how can we enforce it without compromising actual security or competition? And perhaps a little bit more than just you now have security clearance, you're allowed to work here, but perhaps the other aspects that go into it. Anyone, feel free, shoot.
Maybe let's start with how capable are you and how skilled are you? Because, yeah, very often we just really test our colleagues in, say, exercises. We know who is our best ransomware analyst, who is our best malware analyst, and then we work together based on this mutual understanding that who is capable at doing what and how do we pool those resources. So, yeah, as soon as we know how capable and credible we are, then off we go and the best dream team is formed.
Absolutely, the human aspect.
No, the human aspect is huge. The trust piece, we can talk about it all we want. Sharing information, especially in the cyber domain, is super important. But unless you actually practice through like exercises, meeting people, and that personal, the interaction, you just don't build that trust. And without the trust, organizations are just a little bit more reluctant to share information. And even for stuff like exercises, to get especially a civilian organization to dedicate the time and resources to actually participate in an exercise, they need to understand what they're going to get out of it and what type of information. Are they just going to be giving information? What information are they going to get it back? There's got to be a mutual discussion with all the stakeholders involved in a cyber event.
Yeah, I agree. And also, I think it's very important to share, of course, not to share like all the information about like company and etc., but to share some common strengths and weaknesses so that our partners that we'll build in trust with could understand which things, which strengths do we have and which weaknesses we do have, right? Because weaknesses are important as well. Another example might be if you know like Delta, which is Ukrainian security situational awareness battlefield system. It's a system like it's an active military web system that is being used by thousands of Ukrainian people, Ukrainian military people, and some partners. So they build trust on access control, basically. They create layers, and the access to layers are defined by your position in the unit. And some people have read-only access, some people have read-write access, and the commander of the unit can define who will have access to their layer. So they build the trust by exchanging real-time situation awareness information, right? By giving this capability, by giving this platform and allowing other people to share what they feel they need to share in this particular moment.
And has that always been the case in Ukraine? One of the things that stands out from, well, that I remember now from one of the earlier talks in this session was when one of the panelists mentioned crisis makes change, and I was wondering, has this always been the case in Ukraine, or perhaps have the recent events sort of accelerated the standard for cooperating across those sectors, or perhaps has it always been like that?
I would say that Ukraine is really very large country and very chaotic. You know, we have a lot of groups, a lot of organizations. For example, CERT in Ukraine, we have 3 different CERTs, like governmental CERT, military CERT, and other military CERT. Right, so collaboration is something that Ukrainians are kind of forced to do because we are building these like distributed communication layers. Let's put it this way. So yeah, which has plus like upsides because resilience, because you don't have one centralized entity, but the downsides, you have different groups of people with different views, with different ideas, and you kind of need to understand their ideas and their goals in this collaboration to move forward. So yeah, I would say that was always the case. It's just right now we see it in a more like intense way.
Awesome. And Mike, I imagine that, you know, the military sector is very structured. Everyone usually conforms to a set of rules and has how they have to apply themselves. Have you ever come across any sort of situations where, you know, you could have seen a potential sort of clash of opinions and sort of cooperation with the public sector on any, it doesn't only have to be the cyber realm, but perhaps choosing the company that delivers the food, for example? I don't know, on any sort of aspects.
Well, it's interesting because, like you said, the military, we have doctrine, we've got certain protocols, procedures, everything like that. And again, I'll go back to exercising because a lot of military operations are complemented by civilian critical infrastructure. So without that critical infrastructure, we can't really execute our military operations. And when you look at doctrine, whether it be, you know, military doctrine, NIS2, anything like that, depending on where you sit is kind of how you interpret the directives. And we, together, sitting down, may read the same exact thing and interpret it a little bit differently. So unless you sit down with your colleagues in an exercise environment, you really sometimes, there are gaps that you're not going to identify until you actually get into that situation. And those gaps, especially in a time of crisis, can be, at least to delays. Delays lead to things not happening, you know, and when we talk about military operations, that could be costly as far as lives and stuff.
Yeah, and I think I like that you mentioned interpretation of things because we mentioned NATO and the European Union before as well, and I think that one of the reasons why it was said that bilateral relations are quicker and more effective is that you have only 2 entities that need to interpret a single thing instead of perhaps 27 entities that all interpret a certain regulation completely differently, which can be amusing. The English language, I think, is relatively straightforward and definitions can be understood, but it is what it is. And Diana, you work a lot then with the military in Latvia. You know, you organize a lot of exercises. What are your thoughts on the cooperation there? Do you think that maybe we only can collaborate on that exercises part, or do you see future growth as well, where, you know, the collaboration stems into something else, or do you have any sort of particular benefits you see from this collaboration, where you see we have made an impact or they have made an impact on us, for example?
Well, I think that Latvia is lucky because we're a small nation, and it is probably easier than in Ukraine for us to collaborate as the civilians and the military part, because there is just so few of us. We just have to work together. However, we have, say, one really good example. National cybersecurity exercise. Once a year, we do practical, hands-on collaboration and go to our constituencies and really learn about their networks, about their systems. So how it helps is, in case there is a crisis, you don't have to familiarize yourself with, say, unknown system, but you already know it. So if there would be like a huge crisis, CERT.LV comes to help. National Armed Forces and National Guards would also come to help to CERT.LV, hence to this institution. And now we all know the same system. And it is so easy. I mean, in military we say interoperability, right? We're interoperable, so we know each other's systems and we can work together, because what point is of getting somebody to help you in crisis if they're not familiar with how you work and what are your systems? So we're really hands-on training for that, and yeah, at the same time building the relationship and networks.
You mentioned military terminology, interoperable. Is there any? Has there ever been a point where something perhaps gets lost in translation from civilian to military terminologies or dictionaries, or has that ever been a problem? And perhaps Mike can comment on that as well. That
So actually, one of my jobs, I was the strategy branch chief at the NATO Cooperative Cyber Defense Center of Excellence. And when we would do lock shields, a lot of times what we were doing, I would always joke with my technical colleagues that the technical piece was easy. You know, it's either patched or it's not, it's on or it's off, it's a 1 or a 0. But when you bring in people into any of these discussions, so, and just if you had an attack on a certain sector, so you have an attack on a port, at what point does it cross from, you know, just an attack on a port to an issue of national security? And who makes that decision? You know, does it have to be one port that gets attacked or one port and a bank? You know, and at what point does the government actually come in and what do they offer to help? So those are hard conversations because, and a lot of times, especially with private industry, sometimes they're not willing to be very forthcoming during an actual cyber event. They want to try to figure it out. They want to get their you know, communications together, how they're going to approach you know, explaining this to the public. But from the government or national defense side, the earlier we know about a problem, the more we can react and you know, help where necessary. But yeah, definitely the human aspect of cybersecurity, the policy pieces, I think are a lot more challenging than the technical piece.
Totally agree. I mean, tech, guys and girls, we speak tech. That's it. There is only, you know, so many ways how to analyze malware or something. But in the operational, in even strategic level, there are so many different ways to do that. So yeah, exercises is one way to check your assumptions and how you're going to do it, and exactly to yeah, sort it out.
Yeah, and to add, regarding lost in translation, like in Ukraine right now, we have this intense collaboration of private, public, and military, right? And usually private sector, like in cybersecurity, we are using English, we are using like NIST standards, we are using OWASP. Okay, military, Ukrainian military, they have Ukrainian military standards, and right now they are adopting NATO standards like STANAX, English, right? And Ukrainian government regulations are in Ukrainian. So what I have, like on, you know, on an abstract level is how to understand that these are actually the same pieces of the same puzzle, just translated in a different way, one. Then on just technical level, the documentation, like we write, like my team, when we work with military or with government, we write documentation into languages. We write our notes into languages because, you know, they need to be accessible by people who read. And if Ukrainian government only understands Ukrainian slang, governmental slang, you know, we need to put those keywords there. But technical people, security people, private people will not understand them, so we leave English version as well. So yeah, that's a lot to explore.
Absolutely, and you segued very nicely into what I wanted to ask you in terms of this. Let's go from cooperation, from communication to actual cooperation. You know, you're working representing the private industry, working with critical infrastructure entities that are more so public. What is the cooperation in there like? in the sense that when I think of private, I think of a lot more freedom to act, freedom to use technology, to decide what technology to use. And if I think of public, then there's a lot more regulations now in place, whether it's for compliance or simply funding using this technology that is open source or not open source or that is trusted. Do you have any issues sort of complying to perhaps some of the needs of critical infrastructure entities, and that you would actually do it differently if it was your house?
Absolutely, but we have a cheat code. We are under war, right? So right now in Ukraine, purpose is the most important. It should work. Compliance is the second step. Example with Delta, the situational awareness system. The system was 8 years old, already working, adopted by Ukrainian military once when it had Ukrainian compliance. So it received compliance on the 8th year of operation, because it should work first and then we can deal with compliance. Same with right now, we are working with some really large projects for critical infrastructure for military, and the process of procurement, of contracting, it's so slow. But the problems are so, the problems, especially during war, they require rapid response. We cannot wait until all this bureaucracy. We work with certain NATO agencies. We cannot wait 9 months and they tell us this is quickly before doing all the things. So we kind of have, we are pushed to have 2 tracks, actual work. Sometimes started pro bono, started early, started as a workaround, quickly hack to make it work. And then all the bureaucracy go, and once the official contracts and compliance are getting signed, it's going to be like a second stage or second iteration of already working system. This is the most popular example right now how Ukraine does things under the hood first, make it work, and then make it compliant, make it official when it's already working.
Yeah, I think that's a great point on what was touched upon earlier today about basically compliance in the European Union and in several member states of having to adhere to certain documents, and actually, as Varis mentioned earlier, not that we don't trust them, but to double check that everything is actually in place. And here we almost see that sort of everything is put in place, and then you can document what works and make sure that it actually works. No, wonderful. And sort of, does the military also have a similar? I simply do not know. I haven't educated myself on that topic. But is there also a simple sort of not so regulation, but process of adhering to compliance? But I imagine that the military does a lot more testing to actually make sure that it adheres to what's written on the piece of paper.
So I mean, when you're talking about networks, so nationally, each nation has their own process to certify, whatever equipment it is, and then NATO also has a process. So it's, most nations strive to meet NATO's, that they're the baseline, and then once you hit the baseline, it's up to the nation if they want to decide to go above and beyond. But yeah, every nation has its own process. It's interesting. NATO has the NCIA, so they're basically they're in charge of all NATO networks. They do all the security, they do all of the patching, everything like that. So if you're working, if I'm in the U.S. If I'm on U.S. systems, that's completely separate from if I'm at my job at Marcom. Then I'm on a NATO system, and they have 2 different compliance schemes.
Absolutely. And moving, sort of delving from that aspect of NATO and having NATO having a lot of countries. Diana, you've worked a lot with locked shields, the exercise. If I remember correctly, then yesterday I heard a comment suggesting or exploring the option of removing the scoring from the locked shields exercise to create more collaboration. So we're moving here from public, military, private to international collaboration. What do you see? What's your take on that suggestion? Because perhaps there's a possibility that the scoring system creates competition. And so do we actually now have a trade-off between competition raising the skill level and the removing of a potential scoreboard raising the level of collaboration? And which one's better?
Yeah, that's the question, $1 million question, Carl. I personally like scoring because then you
Me
get,
too.
right? Because then you have a chance to get the best guys and girls on your team. And we like to compete. We in cyber, I think, or I don't know, in military or just in Latvia in cyber. I don't know, Carl. How is it? But we like to compete. We know to know where are we on the leaderboard and all that. However, I do also like the idea that every year the teams are at least 2 or now even maybe 3 nations together, right? And each year we have new partners, and we learn new procedures, new ideas from not only Europe, but also from America, also from Asia. So that is a very huge benefit for that. I would keep the scoring if it was up to me, but probably you have a better understanding of how that will go. But I love it.
So I was at the CCDCUE for 5 years, and we continually had this debate about the scoring and the competition aspect with the understanding that the goal is for us to cooperate, share information, everything like that. We've looked at different ways where maybe you could score how well the teams cooperate. And the way the CCDCUE is doing it now, where you just don't have one single blue team, you have to cooperate with other teams, I think it is a good compromise without losing the competition value. And it's been interesting when I was there. Certain nations would want to use the exercise to refine processes and procedures. Other nations would just use it as an opportunity. Hey, we have a bunch of new people. Let's put them in a really stressful environment and see how they react. So it gives the nations a lot of flexibility, and even the nations that they pick. So not every nation that plays in Lock Shields is a NATO nation. So if you want to do cooperation with a partner, you can do that. But if you want to, if you realize that a nation is very good at a particular cybersecurity detail, you can partner with that nation and kind of see how they do business and stuff like that. So it gives, the CCDCUE kind of just sets the table, and they let the nations kind of decide how they operate.
No, yeah, and I personally think that scoring is a very good way of actually evaluating your own level or progress, depending on, as you mentioned, different countries or different setups can tackle it differently, whether you want to teach new people or actually go for it and see what your capability is like. And I think the progress of Latvia has been observable for a very long time. Since last year, a little brag, first time I competed, we won gold. And
Yay, congratulations.
If there wasn't the scoring, then we couldn't be able to brag about it. So, there's a little bit of a plus side to that as well.
But yeah. Scoring is part of gamification, right? And you know that in Ukraine we have gamification even for targeting different military targets, that units receive different scores depending on what they target, and then they can exchange these scores to new drones from government, right? So in Ukraine we built everything around gamification, so definitely scoring is something that motivates people to seek for different strategies, because we can solve same challenges in a different way, right? But scoring makes you think what will be the optimal strategy exactly for these kind of problems.
Yeah, and moving, again, international cooperation, we touched upon it. Also, I'm getting these provocative thoughts and questions into my head, but I think why not shoot them? We've mentioned NATO, we've mentioned the EU, so a lot of similarly minded states joining one collaborative, I won't call it a project or an association, but an entity that sort of supports the same goal. But Anastasia, maybe you have seen that Ukraine, I assume, not only in critical infrastructure, but in general, uses technology that most likely is not being used in for example, Spain or Italy, and that factually a lot of the collaboration maybe almost is more important regionally, sort of close to the regions where similar countries operate and could potentially face similar targets. For example, when these crises started, did you see perhaps that more useful information or more productive collaboration came from like countries that are closer to you geographically, or was that not the case? Not taking into account the US.
To be honest, like in Ukraine, we are consider Ukraine being part of Europe, so we have like really close collaboration with different European countries. But yes, historical aspect is important because like technology-wise, critical infrastructure, power plants, power grids, those things made in Soviet Union, of course, they share a lot of similarities technologically wise, like design-wise, yada yada, right? But when we are talking about cyber, when we are talking about modern IT and software, Ukraine is part of international community, right? So I would say it's a mix, of course, of like both like history, heritage, and modern days.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is something that we see in Latvia as well. Also, having been part of the Soviet Union, then for example, the train lines as well. You know, they still run on the Soviet standard, and that's why we haven't had the European rails as well.
But also the disinformation and everything like Russia threat. We are so good at disinformation in the Eastern Front because we've been, you know, targeted all day, every day since whenever. But then sometimes it is our strength, and then we can, of course, say we understand each other very well on that one. But yeah, I think it makes sense that the proximity of the threat makes our thinking somewhat more focused on that threat. Say, everybody knows APT, Cozy Bear, right, around here. But yeah, then exactly. I don't know that many APTs maybe from Iran. So,
well, it's interesting from my perspective, working with NATO for so long. I think the cyber domain, you know, like we've talked about, you can be attacked from anywhere, so the borders really don't matter. But when you have colleagues, I work with many colleagues that, you know, their relationship with Russia and understanding how they may attack us and their mindset and everything like that, that helps out a lot. I mean, it gives you a really good idea of the realm of the possibility, how you may address all of these different activity in the cyber domain. So from that perspective, I would say, yes, there's a little bit of a difference between somebody that's, you know, in America or Spain, vice Latvia, or, you know, some other nation that's traditionally had to deal with the Russian mindset as far as how they're going to attack another nation.
Yeah, and like knowing Russian language is both like a curse and advantage when you're in Ukraine, right? So, yeah, I also want to add that from defense perspective, in Ukraine right now we have a lot of weapon manufacturers, like drone manufacturers, yada yada, and these devices are very different from those that are being like created by European companies. These are different generations, you know, and if you take some, I know, Spanish something weapon to Ukraine, it might work in current war, but it might be not as effective as something that was already created in Ukraine for the realities. So this is another kind of difference as well.
Absolutely, I think we notice those sort of aspects everywhere across the globe. We recently purchased new trains in Latvia, and then winter came, and they didn't.
Well, we are high north.
A few of them, you know, exactly. You buy from different countries. They have different issues, different weathers, different climates. It's what's
different, like risks and threats model. How we say security, right?
Exactly. All right. With 1 minute left, maybe each of you, is there anything in your fields where you see potential room for improvement in collaboration? Is there any sort of cooperation that perhaps does not yet exist that you would most like to see with sort of any entities, whether it be local, international? Yeah. So
from my perspective, I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of ISACs. So they're basically sector like financial services, ISAC, et cetera. And I think the model that they've set up is really, really good. And the fact that within the sector, they can share indicators of compromise or whatever, and that the person or entity that submits that IOC can remain anonymous, because I think one of the hurdles that we have to get better at is, especially with private sector partners, is that they don't want to be recognized as the attack victim if they don't have to.
Diana?
I would definitely like to see even more cooperation between civilian and military, because belonging to both worlds kind of a little bit, I see there is a huge potential for cooperation, even closer cooperation there. And I think thanks to Ukrainian experience, we are getting there, seeing how well you do that. So looking for even closer cooperation about that in upcoming years.
I would also add that for me, it's not a matter of like new cooperation vectors. It's deepening and intensifying some of them, because it's easy to collaborate and discuss training platforms, for people in cybersecurity. It's more complicated to get into deep tech to discuss protection of CNI, right? So I would say that sometimes it feels like the complicated issues, the things that people don't want to think about, they are less discovered in terms of collaboration than the most easy, tip of the iceberg things.
Yeah, absolutely. And well, thank you all for agreeing to this panel and having this conversation. I think there were a lot of very good points, and I think having this conversation is in one way itself a form of cooperation and collaboration. And I think this conference also serves as a good platform to make new connections and then start those conversations to be able to collaborate and cooperate on multiple topics. So a massive thank you from me to you guys, and Mike and Nastasia, hopefully I hope you guys have a very good talk soon after lunch. Hopefully you guys have enough time to go and eat before that, but once again, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.